Oh, can you guys hear me? Okay. So that really is a very lovely song. And it is, I think, much better when we have the choir here to lead us through it. But we're Unitarians, and so a lot of times we like to just look at the words of something and then decide if we're going to sing it anyways. So hopefully, as we listen to that beautiful piano music, help us get through that song, we were looking at the words and thinking about what it means to be a child of God and stars in the sky and our own beautiful, magnificent selves, even if we did not do it all in rhythm together the way that we sometimes can. But, anyways, today is an interesting day because I came across a really interesting YouTube video called The Seven Levels of Consciousness this week. And I have been really enjoying what they talk about in this 2 hour YouTube video. And so I've been in my mind contemplating all of that, but then I've also been paying attention to what's going on in the world, right? And with the candle of witness that we just offered, and do we how do we combine the two? How do we be a lighthouse in a world that feels so dark without putting ourselves so far above everything that we actually aren't engaged with trying to make the world a better place for people who are genuinely suffering right now? Because there is right now in this world, not everywhere in the world, but there are a number of countries right now that have leaders who I would say probably are not coming from the most enlightened level of consciousness. And so then that tension becomes, what do we do with that when we who want to kind of understand the world from a higher perspective, a more loving, a more compassionate perspective, what do we do when the people that seem to have the most control are not coming from that perspective? And we've been talking about that for years, but I thought what it might be interesting to do is just talk a little bit about, according to this video, the seven planes of consciousness. And then I want to focus on the last part of it, which is the paradigm of being a lighthouse. And so the way that the analogy, the metaphor that this video offers is that if you are in a big mansion, and this mansion has 7 floors, and where people are on the different floors. So it's not necessarily that I'm not saying one is better or worse than the other, but when we talk about consciousness, it's kind of just about how we're viewing the world around us, right? And I think sometimes if we can understand ourselves and we can understand some of these systems, then we can have a little bit more compassion for the people that we don't always seem to be able to understand. But so he talks about the first floor is kind of like when you're in the basement, you can't really see out very well. And this is kind of the level of sort of a victim mentality. It seems that your paradigm of life is, why do things seem to happen to you? And how can you reclaim your power? So with this first level, there's kind of this sense of blame. There's always somebody else that you can look at outside of you to say, this is the reason that I'm not where I want to be in my life right now. We can blame our bosses, we can blame our exes, we can blame the government, we can blame the Republicans, we can blame the Democrats. We tend to look at the world from an outside perspective, think it's coming in and oppressing us, and we're powerless to do anything. And so in this level, they say that you kind of view yourself as that righteous hero, that you're kind of you're the victim, um, but you're gonna kind of be that martyr, and there's not a whole lot of power there. So then you move to that second level, which they say is that next floor. You have a little bit more energy. This is the level of struggle. So we were at the level of victim, and now we've gone up to the level of struggle, and this is the level of the warrior. So this is a necessary step, and this is when you begin to take the paradigm that life is something, instead of life being something that is happening to you, at this next level, we begin to realize that life is something that we can make happen. And so we tend to take off the victim mentality and put on the warrior's armor. And so then on this next level, we're kind of seeing reality as a battlefield. So it's no longer random chaos. Obstacles are simply enemies to be defeated. And so the powerlessness of the victim is replaced by a sense of control. And so this then becomes a testament to self-discipline. It's where ambition comes from. With this next level, the problem is, though, that the main emotion on this level is anger and aggressive energy as a fuel. And so this is, in mythology, it's kind of the level of the hero in our culture. It is a necessary evolutionary leap that we do need to make to get ourselves out of that powerless first floor. Now we're not powerless. We have the emotion, we have the anger, we have the drive. But our consciousness is an understanding that life is still a struggle. And so in that respect, we still kind of view ourselves in a prison. And the paradigm of this second level is the me against the world mentality. And therefore, when you're viewing me against the world, our peace is going to be limited because there's always another battle. And I think we can, if we're looking sort of at the world at large, right, it feels to me, when I was thinking about this, the idea of the constant battle, the idea of the warrior, isn't that kind of where we seem to be right now in the United States? That for decades and decades, there's always been some type of conflict or battle or war that we have been involved in or actually started. And looking at it from a level of consciousness, to me, this starts to make sense, because if you are a leader who is at this level of consciousness, it doesn't matter who your enemy is, you're going to be looking for an enemy, because you don't really know what to do with yourself if you're not the warrior, and the warrior knows how to fight. There's always a battle. And literally, I mean, this is literally, it's in our face right now with Pete Hegseth basically wanting to test the testosterone level of the people in the military. Like that, that's that level of consciousness. And we might not agree with it. We might not see ourselves there, but at least for me, it's helpful when I'm looking around and saying, what is going on? It's like, oh, okay, this is the consciousness of the people that we voted to be in power right now. It is what it is. It's what's going on in Israel. The main emotion is anger, and there's always going to be a battle. And so we move then to the third level, and this is the level of achievement. And this is where we find ourselves being really interested in the self-help books and creating systems. And the idea then becomes the concept of let's work smarter, not harder. And this is a level where a lot of really good things can happen. This is how cities are developed and wonderful athletes, and identity then is infused with performance. So I am a teacher or I am a scientist, but the I am statement is based on what we are doing and what we are achieving. And so the belief that at this level, the person is kind of operating from the belief that they are not quite enough on their own yet. And success is based on what is still external, what we are doing. But like I said, all of these levels have their use. And this third level is where it's the force behind progress. It's where scientific advances come. It's where cities are built. It's where elite athletes hone their bodies and hone their skills. And it's a very comfortable place to be. It's where a lot of people are striving to get to. But in this video, they would say, well, it's still a golden cage. It's a golden cage and it's comfortable, but it's still kind of a cage because our shadow is basically saying that we are living our lives not from one battle to the next, like they are in the warrior phase, but in this achievement phase, we are perpetually looking for our next achievement. So we go for a hike and we get to the top of this mountain, but then we see there's another peak. And so then we try to achieve that next mountain and the next mountain. And it becomes a perpetual state of needing to achieve. And what happens then is that there's kind of a decreasing sense of, wait, I achieved this, and now I achieved this, and now I achieved this, and I still feel a little bit empty. And so that is where the soul, the personality, is achieving great things and doing great things, and the soul is beginning to feel just a little bit claustrophobic. And so this is where you might have the crisis. There's 3 crises that can come from being on this third level. The crises of empty success. How many really famous, at least in the 80s, right? How many famous musicians and rock bands were at the height of their success and then they would get hooked on drugs or they'd commit suicide or something like that because they were achieving everything they thought they needed to achieve to be happy and find that peace, and it was kind of empty. And so that's part of the shadow of being in this phase of life, is that we can realize that all of these external successes begin to feel empty. The other thing that can happen is that we can collapse from exhaustion and burnout, and the body says, okay, that's enough, and we end up having a health crisis. Or the third thing that often can happen is some external event shatters our illusion of control from the outside. There's a hurricane and the house that you have been building is just wiped away overnight, or a fire and it's just gone, or a major car accident and your life is completely changed. And so the illusion of control is where we begin to feel uncomfortable with this third level. And so then that next level, the level of intention, is that first awakening to the power of our inner world. And so this is when we're like, okay, I achieved. I got the job I wanted to get. I got the marriage I wanted to have. I have the house I always thought would make me happy. But there has to be more. And this is where we stop looking outside of us towards the next trophy and we start seeking inward meaning. And so we stop being an ego trying to conquer the world and become the soul that we stop being an ego trying to conquer the world and we become a soul that seeks to express itself within the world. I'm going to say that again. So we stop being an ego, this personality, this facade that we see that's trying to control the world. And we get to begin to experience who we are as a soul that is seeking to express itself in the world. And so it's no longer in this paradigm, it's no longer about what we're going to get. It's about who we are choosing to be. And so it's about the quality of the soul choosing to express in the moment. And that's where we say, when we wake up and look at our to-do list, and in level 3, the achiever will say, okay, today, what do I need to do to be successful? I'm going to do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. I'm going to check it off my checklist, and I'm going to have a successful day. At this next level, we might still have the same to-do list, but the question isn't, what am I going to do today? The question becomes, how am I going to be in the world today as I move through my day in which I'm doing these things? Who am I going to be? Am I going to be loving and kind and compassionate? And I need to go to the DMV? Check. Or I'm going to take a few deep breaths. I'm going to go interact with this person at the DMV who might be having a hard day. I'm going to express kindness and compassion while I'm waiting in line. That's the difference. We go from kind of what we're doing in the outer world to what we're being in the inner world. And then that leads us into the 5th level, which is once we start to do some of that interior assessment, then we realize, okay, maybe what I can do is, instead of pushing against the world, I can become the person I want to be. And then in the level 5, that's the level of flow. And we begin to think of the world as we're on a raft and we're in a river, but we're not trying to row upstream. We're letting it go, and we're letting the river just kind of guide us where it needs to go, with the trust that the flow of the river is more powerful than any of our oars that are trying to be in control of everything. And if we can just go with the flow of the river, and we have an oar to guide us and direct us around the rocks and around the waterfalls, but we're not putting the effort in to move down the river because the flow of life is just taking us where we need to go. And so then we move to the 6th level, which is the level of oneness, where we begin to realize, okay, I'm not actually only in the river, I am of the river. It's like in the ocean, the wave, who's always thought it was the wave, realizes now that it is also part of the ocean. So that's kind of when the ego begins to dissolve into the oneness of kind of that ultimate reality. And that is when the personality begins to go away. And that's where the concept of namaste comes in. The sacred in me acknowledges the sacred in you. We are all one. And so then we get to the seventh level, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, but I had to get us there with the idea of the lighthouse effect. And I love this concept of a lighthouse. And in the video, they talk about the difference between being a lighthouse and being a tugboat. If you are a tugboat, the person on this who is a spiritual tugboat is the one trying to force the awakening of others. If you're on the tugboat, you might get on the boat and row for them to have their own enlightenment. And when we do this, when we think, oh, I have it figured out, I need you to come with me, there's a subtle need for controlling another's journey. And that creates resistance. And then the tugboat ends up draining their own energy, right? But if you are a lighthouse, I just want us to think about the characteristics of a lighthouse real quick, or a star. The lighthouse is the point of light in a dark sky that can be seen for miles around. It is a guiding light, but the lighthouse does not chase lost ships. The lighthouse does not shout out instructions with a loudspeaker. Its only purpose is to be light. It tends its own inner flame and then simply radiates its light diligently, constantly, in all directions, and it doesn't care which ships use its light. I want us to think about that again. The lighthouse is focused on being the light and having the internal light be strong. But it is a light for everybody, for every ship. It doesn't matter if there's pirates on the ship or Gandhi. The light is the beacon in the darkness. It's not offended if a ship chooses to ignore it and crashes against the rocks. Its function is not to save, but to serve as a point of reference by being a stable and brilliant source of light in the midst of darkness. I'm going to say that again. Its function is not to save, but to serve as a point of reference by being a stable and brilliant source of light in the midst of darkness. And then it gives the navigators the information they need to find their way home. So if you think about it, a lighthouse is an influence without force. It is offering guidance without control. It is serving through being, not doing. And when you have the three radiations of the lighthouse, you end up having peace, clarity, and possibility. So the peace becomes a filled anchor for the calm. The lighthouse is anchored to a rock. It is strong, it is calm, it is secure. Its clarity radiates from the idea that it knows what its focus and its purpose is. And then it offers the possibility. When we are at that anchor, when we're anchored, when we're strong, when we're calm, then we can live into our own potential. And when we're doing that, we become a light and an example for other people to live into their own potential without us having to tell them what it is or what they should do or how they should be, because that's not Their light is not our light. My light is not your light. But we all are light and we all have light and we all have the ability to express that light. And so that is what I want us to think about today. Where in the world are we possibly being that light for another? And if you look at that board up there that started really dark, there are a lot of little stars right there that make that little black poster board look kind of pretty and kind of beautiful. And it's simply because each person decided to put a little star representing their own light on that point of darkness. And so that's my invitation for those of us this week that want to with honesty, with compassion, with love for ourselves and gentleness, because none of us are perfect. The invitation is to do a little bit of assessment on these 7 levels of consciousness. Where do you think you might be? And if you're on one of the levels of victimhood or feeling powerless or just feeling like you're burned out, and you think that you might not really be happy with where you're at, I invite you just to think about it and ask yourself, are there ways that I might change my perspective just a little bit? Just a little bit, that I might expand my paradigm just enough that I might move to a different level of consciousness that might give me the energy to make the changes that I need to make in the world, whether it's through what we do in our life or our own perspective. And it can be fun. It doesn't have to be like, the journey of awakening is fun, right? Like we don't have to be like, oh, now we have work to do. No, we're going to just kind of be on that river, and we're going to let the river navigate us, and we have a paddle, and just start paying attention to where you are on the river. And once again, I recognize my metaphors are all over the place, but you go with me. So with that, why don't we sing? And I don't know what song we're supposed to sing. 95, is that? What's the name of it? Oh, There Is More Love Somewhere, in your gray hymnal.